Hello and welcome back to the MMA Bar. Today we're going to discuss the UFC Super Bowl event of the year, the final results, highlights, reactions, and takeaways from the event. UFC 276 went down on Saturday, July 2nd, 2022 inside T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, featuring a main event title fight that saw division kingpin Israel Adesanya defeat Jared Cannonier via unanimous decision to retain his strap. In the co-main event, Alexander Volkanovski defeated Max Holloway for the third time to retain his featherweight title. The UFC 276 event happened during the UFC's 10th annual International Fight Week. Also during the fight week, Daniel Cormier and Khabib Nurmagomedov were inducted into the UFC's Hall of Fame. No doubt this has been the biggest event of the year so far. The event was massive, not only in terms of names on the card, but also in terms of celebrity appearances at the event. The card was stacked from head to bottom. Popular names like Israel Adesanya and Max Holloway, top prospects like Alex Pereira and Sean O'Malley, and all-time greats like Donald Cerrone and Robbie Lawler competed on the card. UFC 276 is all wrapped up, and after such a great start to the night with some outstanding prelims and a couple of impressive knockouts on the main card, I think it's fair to say that it was the title fight that left the crowd wanting more. Apart from a couple of disappointing results such as Sean O'Malley's decision, it was a pretty good night for the MMA in Las Vegas. Israel Adesanya proved he is a force in this sport, and there might be no middleweight in the world who can defeat him. Now, here is an analysis of every fight starting from the prelims. The curtain raiser didn't even last a minute. Lithuanian women's flyweight Julija Stoliarenko took Jessica Rose Clark down and immediately advanced her way into an armbar, mangling Clark's arm and surely dislocating her elbow in the process. On the fifth attempt, Stoliarenko finally has a UFC win, and it comes at the expense of Jessie Jess' second straight opening round armbar defeat. In the second fight of the night, Maycee Barber made it 3 wins in a row with a unanimous decision over former women's flyweight title challenger Jessica Eye, who was insistent on looking for takedowns and clinching up with Barber and managing very little success. Eye announced her retirement afterward. She exits the sport with a record of 15 wins, 11 losses, and a UFC mark of 5 wins, 10 losses. In the next fight of the night, jiu-jitsu specialist Andre Muniz has surely secured himself a top 10 ranking after defeating number 9 ranked middleweight Uriah Hall by unanimous decision. Hall still has never been submitted in his career, but he also landed no significant strikes in either the opening round or the final round. Muniz still dominated the fight and outgrappled Uriah. He just couldn't get the finish. What he will get is another step up in competition after improving his UFC mark to 5-0. The fourth fight of the night was an absolute banger between Dricus du Plessis and Brad Tavares. Tavares had a bright start but was bloodied and beaten up towards the end, and South Africa's du Plessis gets the W on the scoreboards over the Hawaiian middleweight mainstay. It's the first time Dricus has gone the distance, and now he's got a win over a ranked fighter. Whether his style works long-term is up for debate, but what's certain is that he's fun to watch. In the fifth fight of the prelims, Irish welterweight prospect Ian Garry passed his biggest UFC test, winning a decision over a determined Gabe Green in what was a fight more compelling than the 30 to 27 seconds suggested. Green's pressure gave him some success, and he connected on a couple of heavy shots that stunned Garry. But Garry is so sharp, fast, and accurate with his counterstriking that he just had far bigger offensive moments. The former Cage Warriors champion is now 3-0 inside the octagon at just 24 years old. He's got a lot of potentials to be a contender. The next fight on the card was a battle of the legends. Whoever won the fight would hold the record for the most wins in UFC history. When the first pair met back in 2014, Cerrone had won by head kick KO. However, in this rematch, Miller knocked Cerrone off balance and grabbed the neck to lock in a guillotine. Cerrone tapped, and Miller became the first man to submit Cowboy since Benson Henderson way back in 2010. For Miller, he set the record for the most wins in UFC history with 24 wins. For Cerrone, however, he announced his retirement to the fans, saying, I don't love it anymore, and then would be a movie star. In the last fight of the prelims, Jalen Turner and Brad Riddell faced off. In 45 seconds, Turner clipped Brad Riddell with a right hand and hurt him with a body shot that prompted Riddell to panic wrestle. In the blink of an eye, Turner had the neck and finished the city kickboxing fighter with a mounted guillotine. Now, it's time for the main card. The opener, a Sean O'Malley vs. Pedro Munoz fight, was probably the biggest disappointment of the night. Munoz took the first round almost exclusively by throwing low kicks, something O'Malley has been susceptible to in the past. And then, just as O'Malley was slowly but surely starting to find his boxing range and timing, he poked Munoz in the eye. The crowd thought it wasn't a poke, however Munoz said he couldn't see. The fight was called off, and O'Malley celebrated for some reason. We got a no contest in a surprisingly drab affair and presumably a rematch. Hardly a fight anyone would be too eager to run back based on what we saw. In the second fight of the main card, we saw Brian Bam Bam Barberena take on all-time great Robbie Ruthless Lawler. It was an outstanding, grueling back-and-forth striking battle that pitted Lawler's power against Barberena's incredible volume. Lawler was getting the better of the action for much of the contest, however Barberena's pace eventually wore Robbie down, and he hurt the iron-chinned Robbie with a right hand that started the finishing sequence. The body shots and short elbows upstairs really bothered Lawler, and Barberena's relentlessness turned into ruthlessness against the Ruthless One. In one of the most anticipated fights of the night, Sean Strickland took on Alex Pereira. With Alex Pereira having 2 victories over arguably the best striker in UFC history, Israel Adesanya, including a knockout win many expected Strickland to wrestle. Well, he didn't wrestle, and he stood at range in front of the ex-Glory champion. Unsurprisingly, Pereira landed a left hook that dropped Strickland and a follow-up right hand less than 3 minutes into the fight. Strickland was knocked out for a second and stood up protesting the stoppage. This win earned Pereira a title shot since the fight was touted as a title challenger eliminator. The storyline with him and Israel Adesanya is already built in, and he just demolished a top 5 guy in his 3rd UFC appearance. In the co-main, Alexander Volkanovski put on an impressive display and dominated Max Holloway from start to finish. The first 2 fights were very close, but this third one was completely the Australian's, leaving no doubt of his superiority. Holloway was the one who pressed more and went more forward, but Volkanovski counterattacked very well, and he managed to connect his opponent with his left hand on several occasions. For the third round, Volkanovski spent more time standing in the center of the octagon, and there were much more exchanges of punches. The power was on Volkanovski's side, however. When Max got within good distance, he connected the 1-2 well. Holloway came in on the 4th round with a cut above his left eye, and corner tried to patch the wound, but the blood was flowing. Volkanovski started in and out, throwing 2 or 3 punch combinations and then backing off. The Australian dominated the first 4 rounds, and the 5th was no exception. Max needed a knockout, and although he looked for it, he never had a chance to land a good punch. Holloway's face was full of blood. He delivered, but in the end, he could not. The fight went all 5 rounds, and the judges gave 50-45, 50-45, and 50-45. All for the Australian, Alex Volkanovski. Finally, it was time for the main event. Israel Adesanya was far superior to Jared Cannonier and easily retained his middleweight title at UFC 276 at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Israel Adesanya made a huge entrance for his UFC 276 main event with Jared Cannonier using WWE legend The Undertaker's entrance music. Adesanya came to the octagon at Las Vegas in typical showman style as The Undertaker's music played out around the area to welcome him inside the arena. The urn had Cannonier's name on the front of it, and the last stylebender looked to make the latest challenge to his UFC title rest in peace. It was a well-timed entrance for Adesanya, with WWE having had their own huge event on the same night in Vegas, their Money in the Bank premiere live event. Vince McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, Paul Levesque, known as Triple H, and Pat McAfee were in attendance at UFC 276. It wasn't just the music, as the lights dipped and smoke paved his way to the octagon, whilst he wore a hat in the style of the WWE Hall of Famer and carried an urn. Adesanya dominated all 5 rounds, and he did not face an opponent who put him in trouble. Adesanya used the length of his arms well to keep his opponent at a distance. The Nigerian did not rush, and he hurt Cannonier with kicks to the legs in midsection. The first round was dominated by Adesanya. In the second round, Adesanya came out much more aggressive as he chased Cannonier for the first minutes of the round. Cannonier simply could not find the time to get his punches in. In the third, Cannonier had the best moment of the fight when he tried to take Adesanya down, but the Nigerian managed to defend himself well and kept the fight standing. In the fourth and fifth rounds, things did not change much. Adesanya managed the distance well and did not risk too much. With kicks mostly that kept his opponent away, Cannonier lacked the hunger and desire to win. He never went forward with vehemence, stayed on the edge, and left much to be desired. In the end, the judges gave all for UFC middleweight champion Israel Adesanya at 49-46, 49-46, and 50-45. Fans began getting restless during the fifth round, hoping that either man would become more aggressive. But the challenger couldn't get going, and the champion didn't need to do anything else. His win over Cannonier wasn't all that exciting, with the best moment being his entrance. Luckily, Adesanya called out Alex Pereira in his post-fight interview. This is Izzy's next level fight. This is the one that can inject the heat back into his championship reign. It's also a matchup that, at least on paper, could very well feature the highest level of combined striking pedigree for a championship fight in UFC history. Adesanya vs. Pereira 3 was always destined to happen, and it couldn't come at a more welcoming time. Reacting to the fight, Jon Jones tweeted and took shots at Adesanya. "What the heck was this, mother flipper? Just make a Frozen reference with those glossy fingernails, LOL," Jones wrote. In another tweet, he said, "Bro, I can't stop thinking about this stuff. How are you going to threaten a guy like Alex with glossy fingernails and a Frozen reference? I'm over here scratching my head." Jones referred to the in-cage interview where Adesanya told Joe Rogan he was going to make Alex Pereira, the next UFC middleweight title challenger, frozen, like Elsa. Although UFC 276 came with a couple of disappointing fans, the atmosphere was great, and it was the biggest event UFC had held this year. Thank you for watching this video. That's all for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell.